October of '78, I rode into Redemption Creek figuring to buy coffee and be gone by sundown. Instead, I found myself staring at a girl tied to a whipping post in the town square, her hands bound so tight the rope had drawn blood. She was maybe 18, thin as a willow branch, and she couldn't make a sound. Not because she was scared, though Lord knows she had reason to be, but because she'd been born without the gift of hearing or speech. The preacher was calling her a witch, said she'd killed 3 souls with her devil's medicine. The crowd, good Christian folk, every last one, they were nodding along, hungry for judgment the way wolves are hungry for meat. I should have rode on, should have minded my business like I'd done for the 3 years since I'd become nobody worth knowing. But by dawn, 3 men would be dead, and that silent girl would teach me more about mercy than any sermon I ever heard. The square wasn't much, just a patch of dirt between the general store and the church, with a hitching post that doubled as a place to tie up horses or shame sinners, depending on the day. Today, it was doing both. The girl's wrists were raw where the rope bit in, and her bare feet had left small tracks in the dust where they'd dragged her from somewhere. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and I could see bruises blooming purple along her collarbone. I dismounted slow, tying my horse to the rail outside Polk's store. Wasn't planning to get involved. Never did anymore. The preacher stood on the church steps like he was Moses come down from the mountain, his Bible held high. Reverend Silas Caldwell, according to the sign. He was a lean man, all sharp angles and righteousness, the kind who mistakes volume for virtue. "This woman," he bellowed, and the crowd, maybe 50 souls, pressed closer, "stands accused of witchcraft. She claims to heal, but she brings death." I caught the arm of a man standing near me. "What's her crime?" He spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Killed the Morrison twins. Gave 'em some kind of potion. Dead within 3 days. Old Mrs. Brennan, too. Went to that girl for chest pains. Died not a week later." "She a doctor?" "Her daddy was Thomas Hayes. Died 6 months back. Left her alone with his devil books." He looked at me with eyes that had already made up their mind. "Girl can't even talk. Never spoke a word her whole life. How's she learn medicine if she can't speak? Devil taught her, that's how." I looked at the girl again. She wasn't crying, wasn't struggling, just standing there with her chin up, watching the preacher's lips move. Reading them, I realized she understood every word of her own condemnation. Something old and familiar twisted in my gut. The same feeling I'd had 3 years back when my daughter's letter came, the wedding invitation I never answered because the bottle was easier than facing what I'd become. "The Bible is clear," Caldwell's voice cracked with fervor. "Exodus 22 verse 18, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." He held up a coil of rope. Not a noose yet, but the promise of one hung in the air, thick as the dust. My feet started moving before my brain caught up. Old habit from the war. See something wrong, move toward it, sort out the thinking later. "Hold on," I said, stepping into the circle. The crowd parted like I was carrying plague. Caldwell's eyes narrowed, taking in my trail-worn clothes, the rifle on my back, the 3 days of stubble on my jaw. "This is church business, stranger. Move along." "Is there a marshal in this town?" "I am both law and shepherd here." He drew himself up taller. "The Lord has given me authority over—" "The Lord or the townsfolk?" I cut him off. "Because last I checked, territorial law says a person's entitled to a trial, with a judge and evidence. We have evidence. 3 dead, and this creature the only common thread." I looked at the girl. She was staring at my face now, watching my lips same as she'd watched his. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they held something I recognized. The look of someone who'd already accepted the worst. I'd seen that look in the mirror plenty of times. "What's her name?" I asked. "Clara Hayes," someone in the crowd called out. "Thomas Hayes's daughter. Been deaf and dumb since birth." "She deaf," I said, "not dumb. There's a difference." I turned back to Caldwell. "You got witnesses? Someone who saw her do something actually wrong?" "She has books no woman should possess. Knowledge of the body, of herbs and potions. Medical books ain't witchcraft, preacher. They're medicine." "Then explain the deaths." "Don't need to. Just need to know if you're planning to hang her on suspicion or actual proof." I let my hand rest casual-like on my belt, near where my pistol sat. Because territorial law's pretty clear about lynching, and I'm pretty clear about where I stand on it. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Everything still, everything waiting. Who, Caldwell said slowly, are you to interfere? I hadn't planned the words, they just came out. I'm claiming her under territorial law. Right of guardianship for orphaned minors makes her my responsibility. The crowd erupted, voices overlapping, angry, confused. Caldwell's face went from pale to crimson. You can't, just did. Now untie her. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then an elderly woman stepped forward from the crowd, gray hair, bent back, eyes sharp as broken glass. Do it, Silas, she said quietly. The preacher's jaw worked. Finally, he jerked his head at two men who moved to cut the ropes. I helped Clara down, keeping myself between her and the crowd. She was trembling now, the shock finally hitting. As I lifted her onto my horse, Caldwell's voice followed us out of town. You're harboring a murderer, stranger. When she kills you too, your blood's on your own hands. I didn't answer, just rode, feeling 50 pairs of eyes burning into my back, knowing damn well I'd just bet my life on a girl I didn't know. And wondering what the hell Martha would say if she could see me now. My camp sat 5 miles out, tucked in a stand of pines where the creek bent south. Nothing much, just a lean-to shelter I'd built from deadfall, a fire ring, and enough space for my horse to graze. I'd been living out of it for near about 2 months, doing odd jobs at the Davenport Ranch when I needed cash, staying invisible the rest of the time. Clara slid off the horse without help, landing light despite the ordeal. She stood there a moment, taking in the camp, the shelter, the cold fire pit, the tin cup and plate drying on a rock. Her eyes lingered on everything like she was memorizing it, deciding if this was better or worse than what she'd left behind. I busied myself unsaddling the horse, giving her space. When I turned back, she'd disappeared into the shelter. For a second I wondered if I'd made a mistake. Maybe she was scared of me now, trapped out here with a stranger who'd claimed her like property. Then she emerged, carrying a leather medical bag I hadn't noticed before. Must have grabbed it on our way out. She set it down gentle, pulled out a small jar, and pointed at my hand. I looked down, hadn't realized I'd torn it on the saddle horn during the ride. Blood seeped through the split skin across my knuckles. It's nothing, I said. She fixed me with a look that said she'd heard that particular kind of stupid before. Pointed at a flat rock near the fire ring. Sit. I sat. She knelt beside me, opened the jar, some kind of salve that smelled of honey and something sharp I couldn't name. Her touch was gentle but sure, cleaning the wound with water from my canteen, applying the salve with fingers that knew exactly what they were doing. When she wrapped it with clean cloth from her bag, the bandage was neater than any field dressing I'd done in the war. You're good at this, I said. She met my eyes and nodded once, then pulled a small slate from her bag, the kind children use in schoolhouses, and a piece of chalk. Wrote in careful letters, "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Those people think you're a witch. They're not gonna let this go." She erased with her sleeve, wrote again, "Why help me? Good question." I looked at the fire ring, wishing I'd started a fire before this conversation began. Got a daughter somewhere. Haven't seen her in 3 years. Reckon I failed her pretty completely. The words came harder than I expected. Maybe I figured I couldn't fail twice. Clara studied my face for a long moment, then wrote, "What happened?" She got married, invited me to the wedding. I was drinking heavy then, after my wife died. Told myself I'd go. Got drunk instead. I laughed, but it came out bitter. By the time I sobered up, she'd moved east with her husband. Stopped writing after the third letter I never answered. You can write her now. And say what? Sorry I missed the biggest day of your life because whiskey was more important? Some things don't have words that fix them. She looked at me with eyes older than 18 had any right to be. Wrote, "Some things don't need fixing. Just honesty." Before I could answer, my horse nickered. Sharp. Nervous. I was on my feet in a second, rifle in hand. Clara stood too, her body gone still as a deer that's caught a scent. Then I saw them. Lights in the distance, moving through the trees. Torches, coming our way. Clara, I said quietly. She turned. I pointed at the lights. Her face went pale. She grabbed her slate, wrote fast, "They will hang me." "Not tonight, they won't." I loaded the rifle, checked my pistol. The torches were getting closer. I counted 15, maybe more. Clara pulled a knife from her medical bag. Not to fight with, I realized. To spare herself the rope if it came to that. "Put that away," I told her. "Ain't nobody dying tonight if I can help it." The torches broke through the tree line. I counted 17 men. The preacher led them, and next to him walked a man wearing a marshal's badge I hadn't seen in town. They stopped at the edge of the clearing. The marshal's voice carried across the space between us. "Merritt Calhoun, we know who you are. Checked with the territorial office. You're wanted for desertion and assault. You've got no authority to claim anyone. You're a criminal protecting a witch, and come Wednesday, the territorial judge will be here. You'll both hang together." Behind me, I heard Clara's breathing quicken, heard the soft scrape of that knife being picked up again. "How'd you know my name?" I called back. "Telegraph office," the preacher answered. "Took 2 hours, but we found you. Army's been looking for you for 3 years, Calhoun. Seems you ran from more than just grief." The marshal stepped forward. "Come peaceful. Make this easy on everyone." I raised the rifle, not aiming yet, just ready. "Easy's never been my way, Marshal." 17 men, 2 rounds in the rifle, 6 in the pistol. The math wasn't friendly. But I'd been outnumbered before. "First man who moves gets buried tomorrow," I said. "Who's volunteering?" The standoff held for maybe 30 seconds. Felt like 30 years. Then the marshal raised his hand, and the men behind him spread out, forming a half circle around the camp. Not attacking yet, just closing the noose slow and deliberate. "You gonna shoot all 17 of us, Calhoun?" The marshal's voice was tired, not angry, like he'd done this too many times before. "Because that's what it'll take. And when you run out of bullets, we'll still be here." He was right. Damn him, but he was right. "Maybe I don't need to shoot all of you," I said. "Maybe just enough that the rest decide it ain't worth it." "Worth what? Upholding the law?" The preacher pushed forward, his face twisted with righteous fury. "That girl is a murderer. She killed 3 innocent people with her devil's medicine." "3 people died," I corrected. "Dying ain't the same as being killed." "She couldn't save them," Caldwell's voice cracked. "She claimed to heal, and they died in her care. That's proof enough." "Proof of what? That she's not God?" I lowered the rifle an inch, not surrendering, just talking. "My wife died in a doctor's care. Baby too. Should I have hanged him for trying to save them?" The crowd shifted. Some murmurs. Not agreement exactly, but doubt creeping in around the edges. Then a woman stepped forward, middle-aged, hollow-eyed, wearing widow's black. "I'm Sarah Morrison," she said, voice shaking. "Those twins that died, they were mine." My heart sank. Here it comes, I thought. The mother's testimony. The proof they need. But she didn't look at the preacher. She looked at Clara. "I didn't bring them to you until the 3rd day," Sarah said, and her voice broke. "My husband said doctors were too expensive, said prayer would heal them, but the fever kept rising, and I knew." She wiped her eyes. "I knew if I waited any longer I'd lose them. So I defied him and brought them to you in secret." Clara had gone very still behind me. I could feel her presence like a held breath. "They were too far gone," Sarah continued. "You tried everything, gave them medicine, cool baths, sat with them through the night. You held James when he passed, held Emma too, an hour later. You cried over my babies, Miss Hayes. You cried like they were your own." The preacher's face had gone white. "You told me she killed them with witchcraft. You told me," Sarah's voice turned hard, "that if I said it was her fault, God would forgive me for waiting too long. That it wasn't my sin or my husband's, it was hers." She looked at the crowd. "But it was my fault. And his. And I've been lying for 3 months to ease my guilt, blaming a girl who did everything she could to save them." The silence that followed felt like the world cracking open. "What about Mrs. Brennan?" someone called from the back. "She died too." A young man pushed forward. I'm Robert Brennan, nephew of the deceased. I examined my aunt's body. She died of heart failure. She was 73 years old. Her heart simply stopped. He looked at the preacher. You told everyone Miss Hayes killed her. But my aunt's own doctor, the one in Helena, confirmed it was natural causes. Old age, pure and simple. The preacher stumbled backward like he'd been struck. No, no, you don't understand. I think we're starting to, the marshal said quietly. He holstered his pistol. Reverend Caldwell, seems to me we need to have a longer conversation about evidence and bearing false witness. She has to be guilty. The preacher's voice rose to a shriek. She has to be. His hand dove under his coat. I saw it before my brain registered what it meant. Saw the glint of metal, saw where he was aiming, not at me, at Clara. I threw myself sideways as the shot cracked across the clearing, felt the bullet punch into my left shoulder like a hot spike driven through meat and bone. The impact spun me around, and I went down hard, rifle clattering from my hands. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard shouting, boots running, men wrestling someone to the ground. The preacher's voice, high and broken. She killed her. She killed my Emily. She let my daughter die. Then Clara was beside me, her hands pressing against the wound, her face close to mine. I could see tears streaming down her cheeks, her mouth open in a silent cry I'd never hear. The world tilted, darkened at the edges. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the elderly woman from town, the one who'd told the preacher to let Clara go, kneeling beside us. Her lips were moving, saying something I couldn't make out, and then nothing. I woke to lamplight and the smell of yarrow poultice. My shoulder felt like someone had buried an axe in it and left it there to rust. When I tried to move, a hand pressed gently against my chest. Clara. Her face swam into focus above me, pale and drawn. She shook her head. Don't move, then held up her slate. Bullet went through. Clean. You're lucky. Don't feel lucky, I croaked. My mouth tasted like old copper. She erased. Wrote again. You're in Mrs. Caldwell's house. She insisted. Mrs. Caldwell. The old woman from the square. I tried to remember her stepping in, but everything after the gunshot was fever dream fragments. The door creaked open and the woman herself appeared, carrying a basin of water. Up close I could see the resemblance. Same sharp nose as the preacher, same pale eyes. But where his burned with certainty, hers held something softer. Sadness, maybe, or old regret. You'll live, she said, setting the basin down. Though you're a damn fool for taking that bullet. Seemed like the thing to do at the time. My son's in jail. She said it flat, like stating the weather. Marshal Deckard arrested him for assault and attempted murder. The town council's meeting tomorrow to decide what happens next. And Clara? Safe. For now. Adelaide, that was her name, I remembered, looked at the girl with something complicated in her expression. The charges are dropped. Sarah Morrison's confession, Robert Brennan's testimony. There's no case for witchcraft anymore. Just a preacher who went mad with grief. I struggled to sit up. Pain lanced through my shoulder, but I managed it. Grief? Adelaide's mouth tightened. She glanced at Clara, then back to me. There's something you both need to know about why Silas. She stopped, started again. My son had a daughter, Emily, 15 years old, beautiful as morning. She died 8 months ago. Clara had gone very still, her slate forgotten in her lap. Emily had consumption, Adelaide continued, tuberculosis. She'd been sick for a year, but Silas refused to see it. Said prayer would heal her. His wife Sarah, Silas's wife, not the Sarah Morrison. She finally brought Emily to Clara in secret, desperate for anything that might help. Adelaide's voice cracked. Clara did everything she could, gave her medicine for the pain, tried to ease her breathing, but the disease was too far gone. Emily died in Clara's cabin 3 days later. She looked at Clara with tears streaming down her weathered face. You held her hand at the end, didn't you? You were there when she passed, because Sarah couldn't let Silas know she'd defied him. Clara nodded slowly. Her hands moved to her slate. She asked me to tell her father she loved him, that she wasn't afraid. Did you try to tell him? He wouldn't see me. said I was the devil's servant. His wife came for the body and told me never to speak of it. So he blamed you, I said. When those twins died, when Mrs. Brennan died, he saw it as proof. God's judgment on the witch who killed his daughter. Adelaide nodded. He couldn't accept that prayer failed, that medicine failed, that sometimes death just comes. She reached out hesitantly, touched Clara's hand. You gave my granddaughter mercy at the end, and we repaid you with a noose. The word hung in the air, granddaughter. Clara's slate clattered to the floor. She stared at Adelaide with wide eyes. Thomas Hayes, Adelaide said softly, was my son, my firstborn. I gave him up when I was 16, unmarried, disgraced. The Hayes family adopted him back east. He didn't know I was his mother until he came here 5 years ago, looking for his roots. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We kept it secret. Silas never knew he had a half-brother. I was too weak, too afraid of what it would cost. She looked at Clara with naked grief. You're my granddaughter, child, my blood. And I should have claimed you months ago, before any of this happened. I'm sorry. God forgive me. I'm so sorry. Clara's hands were shaking. She picked up the slate, wrote one word. Family? Family, Adelaide confirmed. For the first time since I'd met her, Clara made a sound, a soft, broken sob that came from somewhere deep. Adelaide pulled her close, and they held each other while the lamp flickered and I looked away, giving them what privacy I could. Outside, the wind had picked up. Through the window, I could see clouds building on the horizon, dark and heavy with the promise of storm. A dog started barking somewhere in town, that nervous, warning bark that means something's wrong. Then another dog joined in, and another. Adelaide pulled back from Clara, her head turning toward the window. That's odd. The barking was spreading through town like wildfire, every dog in Redemption Creek raising alarm at once. I struggled to my feet, pain be damned, moved to the window and looked out into the darkening street. Torches, again. But not 17 this time. I counted 30, maybe more, and they were moving toward Adelaide's house. Clara, I said quietly, get your medical bag. Adelaide, you got a back door? What's happening? Adelaide's voice had gone sharp with fear. Preacher's got friends, I said, and they're not here for conversation. The first torch touched the fence outside. The dry wood caught instantly, flames climbing toward the sky like hungry hands. Clara gripped my good arm, her face pale in the growing firelight. Her slate had one word scrawled across it. Run. Too late for that, I said, watching the mob surround the house. Now we see who we really are. The front door shook with the first impact. Someone was trying to break it down, and my rifle was still at the camp, 5 miles away. The door held, barely. Marshal Deckard's voice cut through the shouting. Stand down, all of you, stand down, right now. The pounding stopped. Through the window, I could see him pushing through the crowd, 2 deputies flanking him. The torches wavered, but didn't lower. What in hell do you think you're doing? Deckard demanded. A man I didn't recognize stepped forward, thick-necked, prosperous-looking. Marshal, that girl killed Reverend Caldwell's daughter. Now she's got Mrs. Caldwell fooled with her witch ways. We're here to finish what the Reverend started. The Reverend is in jail for attempted murder, Deckard said flatly. And the charges against Miss Hayes have been dropped. You're about 2 seconds from joining Silas in a cell. Dropped by who? You? The man spat. You weren't even here when those children died. We all remember. We all saw. You saw what Silas Caldwell told you to see. Adelaide's voice rang out from the doorway. She'd stepped outside, Clara and me behind her in the shadows. And you were happy to believe it, because it was easier than admitting sometimes children die despite our best efforts. Adelaide, get back inside, Deckard started. I will not. She descended the porch steps, and I'll be damned if those men didn't give way before her like Moses and the Red Sea. You want to burn my house? Fine. But first you'll hear the truth. She turned to face the crowd, lamplight catching the tears on her face. Thomas Hayes was my son, my firstborn, given up when I was 16 and alone. When he came to this town 5 years ago, we found each other again. And this girl, she gestured to Clara, is my granddaughter, my blood. The crowd went silent as stone. Silas never knew. I was too cowardly to tell him he had a brother. Too afraid of shame, of scandal. Adelaide's voice broke. But I'm not afraid anymore. Clara Hayes is my family, and if you want to harm her, you'll have to go through me first. The thick-necked man shifted his weight. Family or not, she's still what? Marshal Deckard stepped forward. Tried to save 3 lives and failed? That's not murder, Carter. That's medicine. Hell, that's being human. The law says, she's innocent. Deckard pulled a paper from his coat. Territorial judge sent this by telegraph 2 hours ago. After reviewing the evidence, Sarah Morrison's testimony, Dr. Brennan's report, Adelaide's statement, all charges dismissed. More than that, judge ruled that under territorial statute, Adelaide Caldwell has legal standing to claim Clara as kin. It's official. He held up the paper. Says right here, Clara Hayes is recognized as family, which means anyone who harms her answers to territorial law, and to me. The torches began to lower. Not all of them, but enough. Carter looked around, seeing the tide turn. This ain't over. Judge can say what he wants, but some of us remember. Remember what? I stepped out onto the porch, my good arm wrapped around my ribs to keep from showing how much it hurt. Remember how easy it is to blame someone who can't defend themselves. How convenient it is to call something witchcraft instead of admitting you don't understand it. I looked at the crowd, meeting as many eyes as would meet mine. I was at Shiloh. Saw things there that would curl your hair. And you know what the boys called the surgeons when they couldn't save someone? Butchers, incompetents. Some even whispered about curses. I let that sink in. But nobody called it witchcraft because they were men. Only difference here is Clara's a woman, and she's deaf. And that makes her easy to hate. The silence stretched. Then, one by one, the men began to drift away. Not all of them. Carter and a handful of others lingered, their faces hard with unfinished business, but enough that the danger passed, for now. When the street finally cleared, Adelaide sagged against the porch rail. Clara was beside her instantly, supporting her, helping her back inside. Marshal Deckard lingered. You should leave town, Calhoun. Soon as you're able, those men won't forget. Can't leave. Army still wants me for desertion. About that. He reached into his coat again, pulled out another paper, same telegraph that cleared Clara's name. Had this attached. Seems the Army reviewed your case 3 months ago. Your commanding officer testified you deserted to care for your dying wife. They granted amnesty. Charges dropped. I stared at him. They what? You're a free man. Have been for months. Just nobody bothered to tell you. He handed me the paper. It was real. Official seal, signatures, everything. My hands shook reading it. Thank you, I managed. Don't thank me. Thank whoever sent in that testimony. He tipped his hat. I'll keep eyes on your camp tonight, just in case. After he left, I sat in Adelaide's kitchen while Clara changed the dressing on my shoulder. Her touch was gentle, professional. When she finished, she didn't pull away, just stayed there, her hand resting on my good shoulder. I covered it with mine, squeezed once. She squeezed back. Adelaide appeared in the doorway, looking 20 years older than she had that morning. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I need to tell you both. The look on her face made my stomach drop. Silas's wife, Sarah Caldwell, not Sarah Morrison, she came to see me this afternoon, while you were unconscious. Adelaide sat down heavily. She's filing a claim against Clara's estate. Says Thomas borrowed money from the church before he died. $2,000. Says the estate owes it back, with interest. That's a lie, I said. Has to be. Maybe, but she's got a promissory note, signed, dated, witnessed by church elders. Adelaide's voice went flat. If it's real, Clara loses everything. The house, the land, her father's medical practice, everything. Clara had gone pale. Her slate clattered as she picked it up. Why? Because Sarah's scared, Adelaide said. Her husband's facing prison. Her reputation's destroyed. She needs money to run, to start over somewhere else. She looked at Clara with devastation in her eyes. And you're an easy target, child. No family to protect you, or so she thinks. I have family now, Clara wrote, looking between Adelaide and me. You do, I said, and we'll fight this. But Adelaide, if that note's real, then we have 3 days before the hearing. Adelaide stood, straightened her spine. 3 days to prove it's a forgery, or Clara loses everything her father built. Through the window, I could see Carter and his men hadn't gone far. They were gathered at the far end of the street, torches still lit, watching the house. Waiting. Clara gripped my hand tight enough to hurt. Her slate had one word: scared. Me too, I admitted. But we're not alone anymore. That counts for something. Outside, one of the torches moved, started back toward the house. Then another. They're coming back, Adelaide whispered. And this time, the marshal wasn't there to stop them. The torches were maybe 50 yards away when the sound cut through the night. A rifle shot, fired straight up into the air. Every man in that mob froze. Out of the darkness rode a figure on horseback, and even in the dim light I could see he sat the saddle like he was born to it. When he reached the edge of the torchlight, I got a good look. Late 50s, weathered face, wearing buckskin and carrying a rifle like it was part of his arm. Behind him, 4 more riders emerged from the shadows. Blackfoot. I recognized the style of their braids, the beadwork on their clothes. The man in front spoke, and his voice carried the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. These men are disturbing the peace of my friend's house. Carter stepped forward, trying to salvage his courage. This is white man's business. Ain't got nothing to do with you or yours. Thomas Hayes was my friend. Pulled a bullet out of my son 5 years back when your town doctor said he was too busy to treat an Indian. The man's eyes swept the crowd. That makes his daughter my concern. My responsibility. Chief Broken Wing, Adelaide breathed from behind me. The chief nodded to her. Mrs. Caldwell, I heard what happened. Came as soon as word reached our camp. You got no authority here, Carter said, but his voice had lost its edge. Treaty of 1868 says different. Thomas Hayes provided medical care to my people. Under tribal law, that makes him kin. His blood is our blood. Broken Wing rested his rifle across his saddle, casual but clear. Anyone who harms his daughter answers to the Blackfoot Nation. And to me. One of the riders behind him spoke in their language. Broken Wing nodded, then translated. My nephew suggests we escort Mrs. Hayes to our camp where she'll be safe. Federal treaty law means your marshal has no jurisdiction there. Now hold on, Carter started. But, Broken Wing continued, Mrs. Caldwell tells me the white man's law has already spoken. Judge says the girl is innocent. Judge says she is family. He looked at Carter directly. So why are you here with fire? Did your law change in the last hour? No answer. Men shuffling feet, looking anywhere but at the chief. Go home, Broken Wing said quietly. Sleep off your hate. Come morning, maybe you remember that shame tastes worse than admitting you were wrong. Slowly, like ice breaking up in spring, the mob dissolved. Men drifted away into darkness, torches extinguished, voices trailing off. Carter was the last to leave, but even he couldn't hold his ground under Broken Wing's steady gaze. When the street was finally empty, the chief dismounted and approached the porch. Miss Hayes, he said, looking at Clara, your father saved my son's life. I owe him a debt that can never be repaid, but I can offer protection. You are welcome in our camp, for as long as you need. Clara's hands moved to her slate. Thank you, but this is my home. Broken Wing nodded, respect clear in his face. Brave. Like your father. He turned to me. You are the one who stood between her and the rope? Seemed like the thing to do. Good thing. He smiled, just slightly. Thomas spoke of men like you. Said the war took too many, left too few. I think he would be glad you are here. Something in my chest loosened at those words. A man I'd never met, approving of me from beyond the grave through the mouth of a Blackfoot chief. Life worked in strange circles sometimes. We will camp nearby tonight, Broken Wing said, in case more men decide their hate is stronger than their sense. He nodded to Adelaide. You have powerful medicine calling me here. Thomas would be proud. I didn't call you, Adelaide said. I didn't know how. Broken Wing's expression shifted, puzzled. Someone sent a rider to our camp this morning. Said Thomas Hayes's daughter was in danger. Said the white man's law had failed. He looked around. If not you, then who? None of us had an answer. A sound came from the street. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. We all turned. Marshal Deckard emerged from the shadows, but he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a man I'd never seen before. Tall, lean, wearing a doctor's bag and trail dust like he'd ridden hard and fast. Adelaide, the stranger said, and his voice cracked. I came as soon as I heard. Adelaide's hand flew to her mouth. Benjamin? I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. The man, Benjamin, stepped into the light, and I could see tears on his face. Thomas was my partner, my best friend. When word reached Helena about what happened to Clara, he looked at the girl, and his expression shattered. I should have been here months ago. Should have checked on you after Thomas died. I'm so sorry, child. Clara was staring at him, slate forgotten. Dr. Benjamin Cross, Adelaide said, turning to us. Thomas's medical partner. They worked together for 10 years. Cross nodded, then reached into his coat. I have something. And something that might help with Sarah Caldwell's claim about the money. He pulled out a leather-bound ledger. Thomas kept meticulous records, every penny accounted for, and I have them all. Hope flickered in my chest. Can you prove he didn't borrow from the church? Better than that. Cross's smile was grim. I can prove the church borrowed from him. $2,000, loaned after their building burned 3 years ago. They still owe it, with interest. He looked at Clara. You don't owe them money, child. They owe you. The silence that followed felt like the world shifting on its axis. The hearing's in 3 days, Adelaide said quietly. Will that be enough time? It'll have to be. Cross set his bag down, suddenly looking exhausted. I rode 2 days straight to get here. I can ride 3 more days on principle if I have to. Clara's slate moved. Why? You don't know me. I know your father. Cross's voice gentled. And Thomas made me promise something before he died. He knew he was sick, consumption, same as killed his wife. Made me swear that if anything happened to him, I'd watch over you, make sure you were safe, make sure Adelaide could claim you if she chose to. He looked at Adelaide. He told me everything, about you being his mother, about Silas not knowing. He wrote it all down, made it legal, named you as Clara's guardian in his will, Adelaide. Named me as executor of his estate. Cross pulled papers from his coat. This is all legal, all witnessed, all filed with the territorial court in Helena. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I had to ask. I was in Canada, treating an outbreak of typhoid. 300 people sick, 20 dead. I couldn't leave. His voice carried the weight of hard choices. Got back 4 days ago. Came soon as I read the Telegraph report about the witch trial. He looked at Clara. I'm here now. And I'm not leaving until this is settled. Marshal Deckard stepped forward. That's all very touching, but we've still got a problem. Judge Pemberton's holding the hearing day after tomorrow. He's friendly with the Caldwell family. Might not look too kindly on evidence that contradicts what Silas's wife is claiming. Then we'll make sure the evidence is impossible to ignore, Cross said. Through the window, the first light of dawn was starting to show on the horizon, gray and cold, but light nonetheless. Clara tugged my sleeve. When I looked at her, she held up her slate. Do you think we'll win? I thought about the mob that had just dispersed, about Carter's face, still twisted with hate, about a judge who was friends with the preacher, about a legal system that had already tried to hang her once. But I also thought about Adelaide claiming her as granddaughter, about Broken Wing riding through the night, about Dr. Cross carrying 10 years of ledgers 2 days on horseback. I think, I said carefully, that we've got a fighting chance, and sometimes that's all you get. Clara looked at the window, at the coming dawn, wrote one more thing. Dawn means judgment. Or, Adelaide said softly, it means morning. And morning means we're still here to fight. Broken Wing mounted his horse. We will be nearby. If the white man's law fails again, remember, tribal law stands. She has sanctuary with us if she needs it. After he rode off, the five of us stood there in the growing light. Adelaide, Clara, Dr. Cross, Marshall Deckard, and me. An unlikely alliance, if ever there was one. Cross broke the silence. I need to see the promissory note Sarah's claiming Thomas signed. Need to compare it to his actual signature in the ledgers. Can you prove it's a forgery? Adelaide asked. If it is, yes. Thomas had distinctive handwriting. Medical training does that. You learn precision with a pen. And if you can't prove it's a forgery? Deckard asked the question we were all thinking. Cross's jaw tightened. Then we present the church's debt to Thomas and let the judge decide who owes whom. And if the judge sides with Sarah anyway? Nobody had an answer for that. Clara's hand found mine in the dim light, squeezed hard. Her eyes asked the question her slate couldn't. What happens if we lose everything? I squeezed back, wishing I had better comfort to offer than what I said. Then we figure out what comes next, together. Outside, a rider was approaching fast. We all tensed until we saw the deputy's badge catching the light. He dismounted in a rush. Marshal, you need to see this. He held out a telegram, breathing hard. Just came through. It's about the hearing. Deckard read it, and his face went stone. Son of a bitch. What? Adelaide demanded. What does it say? Judge Pemberton moved the hearing up. It's not day after tomorrow. He looked at us, and I saw something like pity in his eyes. It's tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Dr. Cross went pale. That's not enough time. I need to examine the documents, prepare testimony, cross-reference the ledgers. Why would he move it up? I asked, though I already knew. Because someone asked him to, Deckard said grimly. Someone who wants this settled fast before Dr. Cross can build a proper defense. Clara's slate clattered to the floor. We had less than 24 hours. And somewhere in town, Sarah Caldwell was probably sleeping soundly, confident that come tomorrow morning, she'd own everything Thomas Hayes had built. Everything Clara had left. The courthouse was packed by 7:30. Every soul in Redemption Creek who could walk had squeezed into the benches, and those who couldn't fit stood in the back or pressed against the windows outside. The air was thick with body heat and the smell of unwashed wool, but nobody was leaving. Judge Harlan Pemberton sat behind his desk like God at the gates, silver-haired, stern-faced, wearing his authority like a second skin. He'd been friends with Silas Caldwell for 20 years. Everyone knew it. Clara sat between Adelaide and me, her hands folded in her lap so tight her knuckles had gone white. Dr. Cross was at the front table, surrounded by ledgers and papers he'd worked through all night by lamplight. His eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot, but his jaw was set with determination. On the other side sat Sarah Caldwell and her lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Whitmore who'd come up from Denver. He looked expensive and confident, the kind of lawyer who knew how to make bad evidence sound convincing. Pemberton banged his gavel. Court is in session. We're here regarding the estate of Thomas Hayes, deceased, Mrs. Sarah Caldwell has filed a claim stating the deceased owed the First Church of Redemption Creek the sum of $2,000, borrowed 6 months prior to his death. She presents this promissory note as evidence. Whitmore stood, holding up a paper with a flourish. Your Honor, you'll see the signature is clearly Thomas Hayes's. The witnesses are church elders, upstanding members of this community. The debt is legitimate and must be paid from the estate before any inheritance can be distributed to Miss Clara Hayes. Dr. Cross? Pemberton looked over. You represent the estate? I do, Your Honor. Thomas Hayes was my partner and friend for 10 years. I served as executor of his will. Cross stood, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. That promissory note is a forgery. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah's face went pale, then red. That's a serious accusation, Pemberton said. I have serious evidence. Cross opened the largest ledger. These are Thomas Hayes's financial records kept in his own hand, every transaction for the past 10 years. His signature appears on each page, receipts, medical notes, correspondence. I'd like the court to compare them to the signature on Mrs. Caldwell's note. Whitmore was already shaking his head. Your Honor, handwriting can vary, especially when a man is ill or under stress. It doesn't vary this much. Cross held up the note next to a page from the ledger. Thomas Hayes made his capital H with a distinctive loop. See here, in every authentic signature, the loop curves left. On this promissory note, it curves right. That's not variation. That's a different hand. Pemberton leaned forward, studying both documents. The silence stretched like taffy. Additionally, Cross continued, Thomas Hayes never borrowed money. He loaned it to this very church 3 years ago after their building burned. He produced another ledger. $2,000, loaned at 2% interest, signed by Reverend Silas Caldwell and witnessed by the church board. The loan was never repaid. That's a lie. Sarah was on her feet. Lawyer be damned. My husband never— Your husband kept 2 sets of books, Cross said quietly. One for the congregation to see, one with the truth. Thomas discovered the discrepancy 6 months before he died. He was preparing to report the embezzlement to the territorial authorities when his consumption took him. The courtroom exploded. Pemberton's gavel couldn't restore order for a full minute. When quiet finally returned, Whitmore was sweating. Your Honor, these are allegations without— I have the church's own ledgers, Cross interrupted. He pulled out another book. Obtained this morning from the church treasurer, who had no idea what was in them. The entries matched Thomas's records. $2,000 disbursed to Thomas Hayes, never repaid. And, his voice hardened, an additional $3,000 unaccounted for over the past 5 years. Sarah collapsed into her chair, all fight gone out of her. Pemberton's face had gone from stern to granite. Mrs. Caldwell, did you know about the embezzlement when you filed your claim? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Her silence was confession enough. Your Honor, Whitmore stood quickly. My client was clearly misled by her husband's financial— Your client attempted to steal from an orphan to cover her husband's crimes. Pemberton's voice could have cut glass. The promissory note is rejected as fraudulent. The claim is dismissed. Furthermore, he was interrupted by a commotion at the back. The doors burst open and Marshal Deckard entered, followed by 2 territorial rangers in their distinctive blue coats. Your Honor, Deckard said, these rangers have a warrant for Mrs. Sarah Caldwell and church elder James Whitmore, that's her brother, by the way, for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement. Everything happened fast after that. Sarah screaming, being led away in irons, her lawyer backpedaling, claiming he'd been deceived, the crowd roaring with a mixture of outrage and vindication. Through it all, Clara sat frozen, her slate clutched in her lap. Pemberton banged his gavel until order returned. This court finds that not only does the estate owe no money to the church, but the church owes the estate $2,000 plus 3 years' interest. Furthermore, he looked directly at Clara for the first time. Miss Hayes, I owe you an apology. This court nearly failed you twice. Once when false accusations of witchcraft were brought, and again today when we almost allowed theft disguised as legitimate debt. I'm sorry. Clara's hands moved to her slate, but they were shaking too hard to write. Adelaide stood. Your Honor, there's one more matter. I am Clara's grandmother. Thomas Hayes was my natural son, given up for adoption when I was young. I have legal documentation, and Dr. Cross can verify. I've seen the will, Pemberton said. Thomas Hayes named you as guardian. It's legal and binding. He paused. However, there is the question of your son Silas and his connection to the charges against Miss Hayes. My son is in jail for attempted murder, Adelaide said quietly. Whatever relationship we had ended when he pointed a gun at my granddaughter, I choose Clara. The courtroom went dead silent. So noted, Pemberton made a notation. Miss Hayes, you are hereby confirmed as sole heir to your father's estate. Furthermore, under territorial law, Mrs. Adelaide Caldwell is recognized as your legal guardian and family. He banged the gavel. Case closed. This court stands— Wait. A voice from the back. An old man pushed through the crowd, drunk-looking, unshaven, but his eyes were sharp. Your Honor, there's one more thing. Jedediah Smith, Pemberton said wearily. You haven't practiced law in 15 years. What could you possibly— The deserter, Jedediah said. Merritt Calhoun. He's been sitting right there in your courtroom, and you got rangers standing 10 feet from him. My blood went cold. The rangers turned, hands moving toward their pistols. The Army granted him amnesty 3 months ago, Marshal Deckard said quickly. I have the paperwork. That's not what I'm talking about, Jedediah's voice carried clearly. I'm talking about the fact that he stood between that girl and a lynch mob, took a bullet meant for her. Under territorial law, that's grounds for something. Pemberton frowned. Grounds for what? Adoption rights. Jedediah pulled out a battered law book, flipped to a marked page. Territorial Statute, Section 47. Any person who risks their life to save an orphaned minor can petition for guardianship rights, regardless of blood relation. It's an old law. Goes back to the frontier days when family was whoever stood with you, not just who birthed you. He looked at me. Calhoun stood with her. Bled for her. Under the law, he's got as much right to call her family as Adelaide does. Clara's head turned to me, eyes wide. I'm not trying to claim her, I said quickly. Adelaide's her blood, her grandmother, but you're her protector, Adelaide said softly. The one who stood first, when no one else would. She looked at Judge Pemberton. Can they both be her family? In the eyes of the law? Pemberton was quiet for a long moment, studying his books. The statute is clear. Miss Hayes can have multiple legal guardians if the court deems it in her best interest. He looked at Clara. The question is, what does she want? Every eye in the courtroom turned to the deaf girl who'd been silent her whole life. Clara picked up her slate. Her hand still shook, but she wrote carefully, deliberately. When she finished, she held it up. I want them both. I want family. The tears started then. Adelaide weeping openly, Dr. Cross wiping his eyes, half the courtroom sniffling into handkerchiefs. Pemberton banged his gavel gently. Then let it be recorded. Clara Hayes has two legal guardians, Adelaide Caldwell by blood and Merritt Calhoun by bond of protection. Both are recognized as family under territorial law. He stood. This court is adjourned, and may God grant us all the wisdom to recognize family when it stands before us, regardless of how it came to be. As the crowd dispersed, Clara stood between Adelaide and me. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. But for the first time since I'd met her, she was smiling too. Doctor. Cross approached, his own eyes red. Thomas would be so proud, he said to Clara. Then to me, thank you for being the man he hoped someone would be. Outside, the sun was high and bright. A good day. A day for new beginnings. But as we walked toward Adelaide's house, I saw Carter standing across the street, watching. He wasn't alone. 4 or 5 men with him, their faces hard with unfinished business. Marshal Deckard saw them too, moved to intercept, hand on his pistol. Carter spat in the dirt and walked away, but not before he called out, "This ain't over, Calhoun. Law can say what it wants. Some of us have long memories." Clara gripped my hand. "Let them remember," I said, loud enough to carry. "Maybe it'll teach them something about shame." We went inside, closed the door, let the world do what it would. For today, we'd won. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. But for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't facing it alone. 3 days after the trial, I was splitting firewood behind Adelaide's house when I heard horses, not the careful approach of friends, the purposeful stride of men with authority. I set down the axe and walked around front. Marshal Deckard sat his horse in the street, and beside him rode a man I recognized from the trial, one of the territorial rangers. Behind them, a wagon with iron bars, a prisoner transport. My first thought was they'd come for me, that the amnesty had been a mistake, but Deckard was smiling. "Calhoun, is Dr. Cross inside?" "Should be." "Why?" "Need him to witness something. You too, if you're willing." Adelaide and Clara came out onto the porch, Clara wiping flour from her hands. She'd been helping with bread, settling into the rhythm of ordinary life. It suited her. Dr. Cross emerged from the house wiping his spectacles. "Marshal, what's this about?" "Sarah Caldwell wants to talk," Deckard said. "Says she'll confess everything, but only if Miss Hayes is present. Says she owes her the truth." Clara's hands went still. She looked at me, question in her eyes. You don't have to, I said. Whatever she has to say, it can wait. But Clara was already reaching for her slate. I want to hear it. The jail was dim and smelled of old stone and desperation. Sarah Caldwell sat in the cell looking 20 years older than she had at the trial. Hair loose, face haggard, hands restless in her lap. When she saw Clara, something broke in her expression. "Thank you for coming," she said hoarsely. "I know you have no reason to." Her voice failed. Clara waited, slate ready. Sarah took a breath, steadied herself. "I need to tell you about Emily, about what really happened." The room went still. "My daughter, Silas's daughter, she was sick for over a year, consumption like Dr. Cross said. But it was worse than just the disease." Sarah's hands twisted together. "Silas wouldn't accept it. He's a man of faith, you understand. He believed if he prayed hard enough, if we were righteous enough, God would heal her." She looked at the floor. But she got worse. The coughing, the blood, the fever. She was dying, and I could see it, but Silas said doctors were tools of the devil, that faith alone would save her. "So you brought her to Clara," Dr. Cross said quietly. "In secret, at night." Emily was terrified her father would find out, but she was more terrified of dying without trying everything. Sarah's voice cracked. "You were so kind to her, Miss Hayes. So patient. You gave her medicine for the pain, teas to ease her breathing. You held her hand and let her cry when she was scared." Clara's slate was forgotten in her lap. "When she died, 3 days after I first brought her to you, I knew I should tell Silas the truth, that I'd defied him. That his daughter had spent her last days with someone he'd have called a witch." Sarah wiped her eyes. "But I was weak. I told him Emily died in her sleep at home. Let him believe God had taken her peacefully." "But he found out," I said. "The night of Emily's funeral. He found her medicine bottles in her room, saw your father's name on the labels, Miss Hayes. He confronted me, and I—" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "I told him you'd poisoned her, that she'd gone to you in secret, and you'd given her something that killed her. I let him believe his daughter had been murdered rather than admit I'd gone behind his back." The silence was crushing. I told myself it was to protect my marriage, to spare him the pain of knowing I'd defied him. But the truth? Sarah looked at Clara directly now. "The truth is I was angry. Angry that all my prayers hadn't worked. Angry that my daughter died while other people's children lived. And you were an easy target, a girl who couldn't defend herself, couldn't even cry out in her own defense." She stood, came to the bars. "I started the rumors. I told people you'd killed patients. When the Morrison twins died, I convinced Sarah Morrison to blame you. When Mrs. Brennan passed, I made sure everyone heard it was your fault." Her voice broke completely. "I poisoned this town against you because I couldn't face my own guilt. And when you survived the accusations, when mercy was shown to you, I tried to steal everything you had left." Clara's hands were shaking. She picked up her slate, wrote slowly, "Why tell me now? Because I'm going to prison for a long time. 10 years, maybe more, for fraud and embezzlement. My husband's there too, probably for the rest of his life." Sarah pressed her face against the bars. "And I realized something in this cell. I destroyed my family trying to protect it. Destroyed an innocent girl trying to ease my pain. And for what? So I could feel righteous. So I could pretend none of it was my fault?" She sank to her knees. "I don't expect forgiveness. Don't deserve it. But you deserve the truth. You deserve to know that none of this was because of who you are or what you did. It was because of who I am, what I chose to become." Clara stared at her for a long moment. Then her hands moved on the slate. "Did Emily forgive you before she died?" Sarah's breath caught. "Yes. Her last words to me were, 'It's okay, Mama. It's not your fault.'" "She was wrong," Clara wrote. "It was your fault. But she forgave you anyway." She erased, wrote again. "Emily was braver than you." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She crumpled against the bars, weeping. Clara stood, walked to the cell. For a moment, I thought she might strike her, might rage at the woman who'd orchestrated her near hanging. Instead, she reached through the bars and touched Sarah's hand. Sarah looked up, stunned. Clara wrote one more thing, held it where Sarah could see. I'm not Emily, but I understand grief, and I know what it does to people. She pulled her hand back, turned to leave, then stopped, wrote one final message. You have 10 years to decide who you want to be when you get out. Don't waste them being who you were. We left Sarah weeping in her cell. Outside, the sun was bright enough to hurt. That took strength, Dr. Cross said to Clara. More strength than most people have. Clara just shrugged, but I saw the tremble in her hands, saw the cost of that mercy. Back at Adelaide's house, I found her in the kitchen staring at an envelope on the table. When she heard us enter, she looked up with an expression I couldn't read. What is it? I asked. Letter came while you were gone, from Silas. She pushed it toward me. He wants to see Clara. Says there's something she needs to know, something he should have told her months ago. He's in prison, I said. Whatever he wants can wait until— It's about her father, Adelaide interrupted. About how Thomas really died. The room went cold. What do you mean, how he really died? Dr. Cross demanded. Thomas died of consumption. I examined him myself, saw the progression. Read it, Adelaide said quietly. Dr. Cross picked up the letter, scanned it, and his face went white. No, that's not possible. What? I took the letter from his shaking hands. The words swam before my eyes. I need to confess something before I face judgment. Thomas Hayes didn't die of consumption alone. I gave him something, a poison, slow-acting, meant to look like his disease progressing. I killed my half-brother, and Clara deserves to know why. Clara was staring at us, reading our faces, knowing something terrible had just been revealed. I handed her the letter. She read it once, twice. Then her slate clattered to the floor. And for the second time in her life, Clara Hayes made a sound, a raw, animal cry of grief that came from somewhere so deep it seemed to shake the walls. Adelaide caught her as she collapsed, and we held her while she wept, silent sobs that hurt worse than any scream could have. Outside, the sun kept shining. Inside, we just learned that even victories could come with unbearable truths. The prison visit happened 3 days later. Clara had barely spoken, barely written since reading Silas's letter. She sat at Adelaide's kitchen table staring at nothing, her slate untouched, her hands still. You don't have to go, I told her for the 10th time. Whatever he has to say, it won't change what he did. She picked up her slate finally. I need to know why. The territorial prison was a squat stone building that looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself. Silas Caldwell sat in a cell identical to his wife's, but where Sarah had broken, Silas had hardened. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, but there was something in them now that hadn't been there before, clarity maybe, or the exhaustion that comes from finally stopping your run from truth. Thank you for coming, he said when they brought us to his cell. His voice was different, quieter, stripped of its pulpit thunder. Clara just stared at him. I need to tell you about your father, Silas said. About Thomas. About what I did. He looked at his hands like he'd never seen them before. My mother told me the truth after my arrest. That Thomas was my half-brother. That we shared blood I never knew existed. He laughed, bitter as wormwood. All those years, I preached about Christian brotherhood. And I had an actual brother in my town, and I didn't even know it. Get to the point, I said. You poisoned him. Why? Because he knew. Silas's voice cracked. After Emily died, I was consumed with grief and rage. I started taking from the church funds, just small amounts at first, told myself it was compensation for my suffering, for my service. But it grew, $3,000 over 5 years. He looked at Clara. Your father discovered the discrepancy 6 months before he died. He was a good man, your father. He came to me privately, gave me a chance to make it right, said he wouldn't report it if I returned the money and stepped down as reverend. But you didn't. Dr. Cross said. I couldn't. The money was gone. Spent on Sarah's dresses, on making our home look prosperous, on maintaining the illusion that God blessed my ministry with abundance. Silas's hands twisted together. So I gave Thomas something. Arsenic. Mixed with his medicine for the consumption. Small doses over 3 months. Made his disease progress faster. Made it look natural. Clara's face had gone pale as bone. I told myself I had no choice. That he was sick anyway, that I was just hastening the inevitable, that God would understand. Silas looked at her directly. But God doesn't forgive murder, Miss Hayes, even when we dress it in pretty lies. The silence stretched like a rope about to snap. Then Clara picked up her slate, wrote for a long time. When she finished, she held it up, and I read it aloud for her. My father died slowly, in pain, believing his body was failing him. He spent his last months afraid, wondering if he'd live to see me grown. You took that time from him, from me. Silas nodded, tears streaming. Yes. You killed your own brother to hide stealing money. Yes. You tried to have me hanged for witchcraft when your grief needed someone to blame. Yes. You shot a man who was protecting me. Yes. Silas's voice was barely a whisper. Yes to all of it. And I will hang for it. They've already set the date. 2 weeks from tomorrow. I'll die at sunrise, same way I wanted you to die. Clara erased her slate, wrote again. Good. The word hung in the air, brutal and final. But then she wrote more. My father would have forgiven you. He believed in redemption. Believed everyone deserved mercy. She showed it to Silas, let him read it, then erased it and wrote the last thing. I'm not my father, and you don't deserve his mercy, but I'll give you something else. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small photograph, faded, cracked, but still clear. Emily Caldwell, young and smiling, holding a flower. Where did you get that? Silas breathed. She gave it to me the night she died, asked me to keep it, said if anything happened, she wanted someone to remember her as happy. Clara pushed the photograph through the bars. So you can remember her as she was, not as the excuse you used to become a monster. Silas took the photograph with shaking hands, pressed it to his chest, and broke completely. The sound he made was inhuman, a father's grief finally released after months of rage had kept it caged. We left him like that, weeping over the last image of his daughter. Outside, Marshal Deckard was waiting. There's something else you should know, he said. The territorial governor reviewed the case. Given Silas's confession to murder, the embezzlement, the attempted murder of you, Calhoun, he's decided to make an example. Meaning? I asked. Meaning Silas Caldwell will hang, yes, but the governor's also issuing a formal pardon and apology to Miss Hayes, full restitution from the church's remaining assets, and, he paused, he's proposing a new territorial law, calls it the Hayes Protection Act, makes it illegal to prosecute anyone for witchcraft or similar superstitious charges, uses Clara's case as the precedent. Clara's eyes went wide. Your suffering's going to protect others, Deckard said quietly. Everyone who comes after you will have the law on their side from the start. That's something, isn't it? Dr. Cross put his hand on Clara's shoulder. Your father would be so proud. We walked back to Adelaide's house as the sun started to set, gold and red bleeding across the sky like a promise. The town square was full of people finishing their daily business, and I braced for the stares, the whispers, the judgment. But instead, people nodded, tipped their hats. A woman crossed the street to speak to Clara, tears in her eyes, thanking her for treating her son's fever 2 years back. A man I recognized from the mob apologized, said he'd been a fool, said he hoped she could forgive him someday. Slowly, like ice breaking in spring, Redemption Creek was changing. That night, the 4 of us sat on Adelaide's porch, her, Clara, Dr. Cross, and me. Chief Brokenwing had ridden by earlier, bringing a gift, a medicine bag, hand-beaded, with symbols of healing and protection. For the healer, he'd said simply, and left before Clara could respond. Now she held it in her lap, fingers tracing the beadwork. I've been thinking, Dr. Cross said. Thomas's medical practice shouldn't sit empty. And you, Clara, you have your father's knowledge, his gift. When you're ready, if you wanted to take over the practice, I'd be honored to help train you. Make it official. Clara looked at him, then at her slate. A deaf doctor. A skilled healer, cross-corrected, who happens to be deaf. The medicine doesn't care if you can hear, it cares if you can see what's wrong and fix it. Adelaide smiled. Your father always said you had better hands than he did, steadier, gentler. What about the town? Will they come to me? Some will, I said, some won't, but the ones who matter will, and you'll build from there. Clara considered this, then nodded slowly, wrote, I want to try. We sat in companionable silence as the stars came out. Somewhere in town, a dog barked, a baby cried, life continuing its ordinary rhythms. Finally, Clara tapped my arm, held up her slate. You could stay, be my assistant. You're good at following orders. I laughed, first real laugh in weeks. I'm terrible at following orders. Ask anyone who served with me. Then be my partner. Keep me safe while I heal people. Something in my chest tightened. You sure you want an old drunk deserter hanging around? She erased, wrote carefully. You're not that anymore. You're the man who stood between me and a rope. Your family. Adelaide reached over, took my hand. You are, you know, by law now, by choice, by everything that matters. I looked at these three people, an old woman who'd finally claimed her truth, a young healer who'd survived hell and chose mercy, a doctor who'd ridden 2 days to honor a dead friend's wish, my family, chosen, not born, but no less real for it. All right, I said. I'll stay, on one condition. What? You help me write a letter to my daughter. A real one this time. Clara's smile could have lit the whole territory. 2 weeks later, as dawn broke red and gold over Redemption Creek, Silas Caldwell hanged. I didn't attend. Neither did Clara or Adelaide. Some deaths you don't need to witness to know they happened. But that same morning, Clara opened her father's medical practice. The first patient was a young mother with a sick child. The second was an old man with arthritis. The third was Carter, the one who'd led the mob, with a badly infected hand he was too proud to admit he needed help with. Clara treated them all the same, gentle, professional, silent except for the slate where she wrote instructions and advice. And when Carter left, shamefaced but healing, he turned back at the door. Thank you, Miss Hayes. And I'm sorry for everything. Clara nodded. Just that. Nothing more needed. That night, I posted the letter to my daughter. 3 pages, honest and raw, asking nothing but offering everything, truth, apology, hope that maybe it wasn't too late. 6 months later, she wrote back. But that's another story. For now, standing on Adelaide's porch watching Clara walk to her practice in the morning light, I understood something I hadn't in 3 years. Redemption isn't about erasing who you were. It's about choosing who you'll be. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to make that choice surrounded by people who chose you right back. The sun rose higher, washing Redemption Creek in gold, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I believed in mornings again.